Okay, that's right. Dan's on first. 115. Think you got it? All right, so what I'll do, I'll just kind of roll it here. I'll skip out and go to the, okay, here we go. Okay. Okay, let's get this ball rolling. I'm just here to give a little introduction. I'm not going to say anything that hasn't already been said by Chad earlier. Chad is going to be the moderator of the session, and I think all the presentations are loaded and ready to go. If you haven't loaded yours, then bring it up right before, Chad, before you they give their talk. They can do it right then, right? Okay, that'd be the easiest thing to do. Okay, so like we mentioned a couple of times, the MLRA update, the 296, is a three-stage process. This is the assessment stage, and this involves what changes are needed and why. And it's interesting, you've got the 7 factors that go into the MLRA boundaries: the physiography, geology, water, climate, biology, soils, and land use. And why are you changing the boundary? Is it one of those, or is it better tools and better understanding? And that may very well be the case. But the important thing to know here is that this is all about conversations. It's about not only having the conversations here, but your presentations are being recorded, so people can come back and look and see what you said and then get in touch with you. But we're still at a wishful thinking stage. So what you're talking about changing isn't scratched in steel yet. There's still time to change your mind. You can talk with your neighbors and say, well, you know, I see what you're talking about now, about moving this boundary and so forth. So that's about all I have to say. Is we're still in phase 1, the assessment stage, and Chad did a good job going over phase 2, the proposal stage, and how that will come about. There's still things that need to be worked out, but that's what we're here to do. So with that, we've got 5 minutes still before we start with. Okay. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chad and Mike. And Mike, you got a little bit extra time to expound on your ideas. Okay.
Somebody move my. Oh, goodness. Sorry for the technical difficulty. My desktop file moved on me here somewhere.
Look, I put them in a folder.
Oh.
There should be a 296 folder.
Sorry.
But we gotta find it.
Jeez, that's tiny. Okay, hopefully you can read the font there a little bit better. So, I guess I gotta stand here. Okay, so this is for Region 1 proposals. I'm Mike Regan. I'm the Regional Director for Region 1 in Portland, Oregon. So, our region covers the northwest part of the lower 48 and Alaska. So I'm gonna be talking about kind of those two different pieces here. So what I want to basically start in with here is kind of the Alaska version here, and just give you a little bit of update. I'm just basically going to read this. This is the same thing that's the poster out there in the poster session, so I'll try to be pretty basic about this. You know, I guess in Region 1, we have probably quite a few needs for updates to these lines that we probably don't even have a real good handle on yet, because the existing MLRA lines were mainly drawn prior to any Surgo mapping. So we've got a lot of areas out there that now have Surgo mapping, so we can revise these lines a lot more in the future. But just for now, for this kind of you know, short-term goal here, we're talking about some of the things that we think would really be a good edit in the short run. So anyway, Region 1 is about 825,000 square miles. And about 40 MLRAs. In our region, the precipitation ranges from less than 200 millimeters to more than 5,000 millimeters. Parent material, glaciation, volcanism, subduction. We've got elevations that range from sea level to 6,200 meters. So many of our existing MLRA concepts are either too broad and include major differences in climate, or are too specific to identify very specific land uses, which are continually expanding. So many of the boundaries between the MLRAs are delineated at the land resource unit scale of 1 to 1 million. So we've got a lot of too much detail along the edges. You know, the lines aren't smooth enough. So that's definitely one thing that we need to take care of and get it at the proper scale. So we're basically going to look at, you know, using GIS to do a lot of analysis in the future here to refine some of these things a little bit more. But for Alaska, we are looking at, let me zoom over here a little bit so you can see it a little bit better maybe. Whoops, that's a little bit too far. Okay, so basically we just had a few things in Alaska, mainly in southern Alaska, south central. So let me just read this Alaska Soil Survey blurb here for some information. So Alaska, it says, Alaska truly is the last frontier of soil survey in the United States. It has more land mass than Texas, California, Montana, and Kansas combined. Less than 21% of the state has Surgo coverage. There are more than 39 million unmapped private acres in Alaska. Much of that is tribally managed. The remoteness and expanse of Alaska, you know, makes it very difficult, you know, to get out in the field. I mean, logistically, it's extremely challenging, and folks from Alaska that are here, you know what I'm talking about for sure. Alaska you can access 7% of the state off the road system. So that leaves 93% of the state you can't drive to. Let's see. And over there in kind of the southwest, we have MLRAs 225 and 235, and we're proposing to combine those into MLRA 225, eliminating 235. And so these are coastal landforms, and the geology and climate are all identical in those two. So we're just proposing to put them together. And then MLRAs 220, 221, and 225, we're going to propose to combine 221 with 220 and 225, eliminate 221. So these, again, the landforms, geology, climate are identical in those areas. So that's all we had right now for Alaska, and then let me move up to the lower 48 Pacific Northwest part here, where we have a few more proposals because we have so much more new Surgo coverage today than when these were drawn. So let me start out there in the top left over in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. So we have MLRAs 1, 2, 3, and 4 that are very kind of linear from north to south running through there. There's a spot on the Olympic Peninsula, the very top of it in elevation, which was put into MLRA 3. It is in MLRA 3 right now, which is the Cascades of Oregon and Washington. So we're proposing that top of the Olympic Peninsula just be merged in with its current surrounding MLRA 1, which is basically it's the coast range of the Pacific Northwest. So, and then moving over to MLRA 6, 8, and 43, we're going to have to work with Region 4, our neighbor over there, on some updates and see how we can take a look at maybe, redrawing some lines or fleshing out some concepts going along with soil correlation and ecological sites. There are some things that look pretty similar in terms of map units inside those MLRAs, so it makes you wonder why are we calling them different MLRAs. So, whoops. Okay, and then this one may be a little bit more controversial, especially with the state people who have a lot of, range ecological site MLRA numbers embedded in them. This will be probably our biggest challenge in all of this is, looking at that workload of changing all those ecological sites we have because they have that MLRA number embedded in them. So that'll be a lot of working with the state staff to resolve that if we go forward with some of these proposals. So anyway, in MLRA 8 and 9, they're pretty similar land use. Really 8 has parts of 9 in it. 9 is really the Palouse. If you've ever been up to North Idaho in that Palouse region, that's Luss Hills and so on. You move out to the west of there, and you have the same Luss Hills, but they're have channels cut through them from glacial outburst flooding. So they call that a different MLRA. Well, it's kind of hard to manage, a map unit that's on that Luss Island in 8 versus the same one that's over there in 9. So we're taking a look at maybe combining those MLRAs, and maybe we can take the channeled scablands that go out through there and put them in an LRU, something to that effect. Okay, and then let me move down to MLRA 12. So MLRA 12 and 43 in Region 4 look very, very similar. This is, MLRA 12 is a land resource region B, but MLRA 43 is land resource region E. But I'm not quite sure why they were separated in the past, but they were. But working with Region 4, I think we're all on the same page proposing this one and saying they look really similar. So maybe they could just go together. MLRA 12 is not very large either. So that's another reason. And then MLRA 13, it's basically the same issue. There's a very small MLRA there that could probably be working with our neighbors joined to some other larger MLRA type concepts. Okay, and then let me move over to my favorite one here, which is MLRA 10 and 43C. And this, I just say it's my favorite because I was the correlator there for a little while, so I know it a little bit. So anyway, this is another one working with Region 4, 2 different land resource regions, B and E. We're talking about merging these together. Originally, These two MLRAs were separated on range versus forest. And if you've been up on the Sunday field trip and looked at the climate and aspect relationships up here, and you see that range on the south side, forest on the north, there's a lot of that intermingling that goes on in 10 and 43C there in Central Oregon. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it's a very complicated, intricate pattern of range versus forest, and our proposal is to just merge them together. It's really difficult to separate that at this scale, so it's more of a cartographic scale issue there. We don't think we can maintain that, very sinuous line and all kinds of pieces and parts. So that's about all I had for Region 1. Does anybody have any questions for me? Oh, 4? Let me zoom back over there. So, let's see. Oh, yeah, sorry, thanks for bringing that up. I did fail to mention that MLRA 4 is basically the isomesic Sitka spruce belt on the coast, and when they delineated that prior to Surgo, they basically took the lines too far to the east. That zone is a lot narrower than the current line, so based on the ecology. So that isomesic or isofrigid zone does not go that far inland as currently depicted. Did that answer your question? And then we'll have to work with Region 2 on whether or not MLRA, because currently we have MLRA 4A and 4B. 4A is in Region 1, 4B is in Region 2. They're not very large MLRAs. They may be LRUs of the same MLRA. We just go to 4 and get rid of the suffix and have 2 LRUs. So.
Talking about lumping 12 and 43.
It's mountains and valleys.
It's an extension of the basin and range that was dissected by the hotspot migrated to southwestern mountains with what it goes from that. Physiographically, I don't see where it's naturally central Rocky Mountain. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, land use is fairly similar, even if the lithology is a little different, but and it's not a very large MLRA either, so, yeah. Was there another question?
Yeah, I was curious, what's the concept for the how far does it?
That's a great question. So MLRA 10 was the last MLRA to be given a symbol. It was our garbage can map unit. It extends all the way from the east slopes of the Cascades in Oregon and Washington, all the way over to eastern Idaho. So you're crossing lots of different lithologies, parent materials, land uses. So the concept was really, it was, what was left over. So it needs a lot of refinement probably. And in fact, I don't have it on here because it's only a little piece of it that we know that we'd like to swap basically. There's right where we're at in Boise. If you all have been looking at your maps, you know where we're at there in Boise. You see that little light colored edge that kind of wraps around the west and south side of the Idaho batholith there. That is a very skinny extent of MLRA 10. And that was basically another one of those range forest things between MLRA 43, which was forested, and MLRA 10 range. We're probably going to take a longer look at that, but as it butts up to the batholith there, we're thinking that we could probably eliminate it because it's pretty skinny, put all the sedimentary geology, geomorphology into MLR 11, and the things that are bedrock controlled, rangeland could just go into 43. But we'll have to examine a lot of pieces and parts of MLR 10 because it's pretty complicated. So, any others? All right, thanks a lot.
Did you have a did you?
Yeah.
If you need a pointer.
Yeah. Got that.
experience with BitLocker, so.
Don't do BitLocker. That wouldn't do it. Get rid of that. Nope, nope. Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Stiles, Regional Director for the Pacific Region. I apologize if I'm not real knowledgeable, because honestly, Ed Talon, my Senior Regional Soil Scientist, has been doing this, so I have had to do a quick learn on everything here. So, of course, our update process and what we're doing to look at our boundaries is that we're evaluating the concepts, going through our case files, looking and seeing what kind of information is there, evaluating and editing the MLRAs assigned to those map units in the MLRA area overlap table in NASAS, joining MLRA assignment to GSERGO, evaluating spatially the GSERGO to publish MLRA lines, resolving the differences, and then hoping to create LRUs for the islands within the MLRA. And I must say this is the majority of what we have to do for our region. And we see that map units exist in multiple MLRAs. So here's what Mike was talking about with Region 4. This is, MLRA 4, Region 1, extending down into Region 2. This is where we have the redwood forests, and it will revert to some number. On here it says MLRA 4. It's going to be some number assigned. It's not going to be the B on here. In MLRA 5, the islands that we see isolated out in here, as you understand, California has very complex geology and climatology. So we see that we have islands. Those islands will become LRUs. MLRAs 14 and 15, again, islands will become LRUs. Here in MLRAs 15 and 17, islands become LRUs. Got a recurring theme here. MLRA 16, we're going to have better definition between 16 and 17. 16 is that area in the Bay Delta. Got a little bit different soil, different concepts, different land use down in there. So they'll refine that border area. MLRA 18, the big question here is determining if the Tehachapi Mountains better fit into 22 or as an LRU. We're moving that southern boundary down into MLRA 20. MLRAs 19 and 20 along the southern coast down there, we adjust the boundaries to better fit SERGO. MLRA 21, matching the western SERGO boundary, connecting the island and Scott Valley, becomes an LRU of MLRA 5. MLRAs 22A and 22B, the MLRA 22A will revert back to MLRA 22 or whatever number it is assigned. MLRA 22B will be then assigned a new symbol. MLRA 23, again, islands become LRUs. 24, this is where Oregon has proposed extending that, or Region 1, extending that MLRA 24 north to replace the eastern MLRA 23. In MLRA 25, we're editing that boundary, again, match the SERGO and proposed 28A changes that are being proposed by Region 8. In 26, the island of 21, which is the Sierra Valley, fairly unique area, it's actually going to become an LRU of MLRA 26. 27, again, adjusting those boundaries. to better fit Surgo. 28B, new symbol assigned and adjusting that boundary according to some work that we're doing with Region 8 in discussions to get that new boundary set. In MLRA 29, adjusting again the boundary to fit Surgo. And MLRA 29, combining this southern area with MLRA 18, 22 or 30 as LRU. This is a long tail that we have dangling down going in to the Antelope Valley. That is all of the changes that we're proposing to make that I can show here. I know that Amy brought up, our state soil scientist from Hawaii brought up the thoughts on changing or modifying the MLRAs that are in the Hawaiian Islands. We have the Pacific Islands, we have 17 of them there. The Pacific Islands are very unique. We haven't really discussed that a lot. It's a unique setting. I'm not really sure how we are going to approach that. I'm open to ideas on it, discussions with Amy, and thoughts from leadership about what we want to do about having that many MLRAs in such a small area. Do I have any questions? Of course, if you have any questions, it's going to be like Ask Ed Talon.
The Pacific Basin, they're allowed to have smaller lines, but as far as it's 17 to hear that there's 17 MRAs, why it seems pretty
If you live there, you see why it happens. If you're there, you know it's real.
Yeah, I understand the physiography.
Well, let me rephrase it. Is there an option to do any of the other updates? Because you're going to be updating the whole handbook if we have other,
Specifically
the climatic
updates.
things or
Right.
any of the other
What,
of our MLRAs.
I don't know. I will put it on my list.
Put it on your list. Thank you.
Okay, so we're putting this on the list that there's a side conversation going on over here about whether or not we're going to have active updates of the handbook that will allow an update of climatological information or for the Pacific Islands. Thank you all.
I had it open. Yep, there she is.
This is if you need it, there's a pointer at the top on it.
Oh, there is. Okay, great. Okay. Since we're being live streamed, I just wanted to give a shout out to all the staff in Region 4 that helped come up with all of these revisions and changes. They did all the work to get us where we are here with our proposals for Region 4. So I'm not going to go over a lot of the specific changes to the MLRAs and LRUs, I should say proposed changes, because they're not finalized yet. I wanted to go over more of the process and then talk about where we go from here to make sure we have buy-in on these proposed revisions from all of our partners. Oh, that picture's from Glacier National Park. Beth, did you take that picture, or maybe Jay? It was either me or Pat. Okay. I figured even if you don't care about what I'm talking about, you can look at some pretty pictures. So I know you can't see this in the back, but this is just a map of the current MLRAs in Region 4 and the office locations. So we cover about just shy of 200 million acres from the Canadian border into New Mexico. So in Ag Handbook 296, the last version that was published in 2006, some of the MLRAs were designated by a number and an alpha character. Some were just numbers. When the new National Soil Survey Handbook Section 649 came out, it defines MLRAs as a number only and LRUs as an alpha character. So when those requirements changed and those criteria changed, we pretty much had to take a look at our whole region and look at the MLRAs, because we had some that were just numbers, some that had numbers with alpha characters. And if you were to take just, for instance, 43, B, A, B, and C, and put them all together into one MLRA of 43 and have 3 LRUs of A, B, and C, we'd have a 50 million acre LRU that goes from 0 to 100 inches of precip, 0 to 100 days of frost-free, and just too variable to have that large of an MLRA. So this was the process that we used in Region 4. We started with the MLRA Soil Survey offices, right? They're the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are responsible for their area, and we thought we should start with them to kind of get our ducks in a row of what we thought the MLRAs should be. So they reviewed all of the concepts, and they looked at the 7 factors that make up an MLRA. So dominant land use, physiography, geology, climate, water, soil, and biological resources. So we started a geodatabase at the northern end of the region, and each office incorporated their proposals into that geodatabase. And in between the offices, it came into the regional office, and the soil data quality specialist looked at it and would say, well, this MLRA is really little, or are you sure there's really a break here, or how are the concepts being used consistently? Some of our states had defined their LRUs by climate, and we took an effort while we were looking at the MLRAs to also define geographic LRUs. So we have our LRUs done as well, and I've got a map of that. If anyone wants to look at it while we're here, you can look at it. So the next step is now to engage the partners and the cooperators, state staff, and have everybody look at what we did and throw darts at it and make recommendations and suggestions, or concur on it if they're okay with it. And then once it goes through the partners and we're all happy with what it looks like, then we'll go up through the chain that's identified in National Soil Survey Handbook 649. So it goes on to the national leader at the center to review, and then on to the Soil Science Division Director. So this was just an example, like I was talking about MLRA 43, A, B, and C. You can see that it covers, maybe that doesn't work. Everything outlined in black here is basically would become one MLRA if we just use 43 as the number and A, B, and C as the LRUs. And so that MLR would have been too large. So instead of just making one big MLRA or keeping just the 3 A, B, and C, we identified 6 unique MLRAs in that area based on the 7 factors. And this is the same information that's on our poster in the other room if you want to take a look at it. And I know you really can't see this, but this is just a comparison of the existing MLRAs to what we're proposing for the new MLRAs. So from here on out, what I'd like to do is, if you want to come look at the poster, or you want to look at the LRUs on this map, we can do that this week. But I'd like to send out the shapefile to everybody, all the cooperators, all the partners, and have them look at it, and then we could work on an office-by-office basis to review the specific changes, or a state-by-state basis, whatever works for different cooperators and partners. The other thing that we would like to share with you when we share that shapefile is we put together these matrices, and it breaks out all the 7 factors and how they are differentiated between the MLRAs. So you can at a glance see how they were differentiated and what the main characteristics are. We didn't want to get started on any of the write-ups until we know for sure, Chad, what they're going to be, whether there's going to be a write-up of all the 7 elements for the LRUs or just the MLRAs. Okay, so we figured if we start with the matrix, we've got all the information captured and we can put it in whatever write-up we want. So if anyone has any other suggestions of how to proceed or move forward, does anyone know if it's a grizzly bear or a black bear? Mm-hmm. That was Yellowstone Park Mother's Day last year. Any questions? Larry?
Yeah, I was just curious, how big of a role does land use play in delineation of a major land resource area?
Sometimes it plays a really large role. Like if you look at MLRA 51 in New Mexico, southern Colorado, you know, the biggest difference there is it's irrigated and it's flat and it's farmland, right? So, but it comes along with other factors as well. So the landforms change once you get out of the valley. So it's usually, we try not to differentiate an MLRA just based on one of the 7 factors. You like to have multiple factors go into it. And for us, and of course, in our region, a lot of it is geomorphology, geology, climate are big factors. But land use is a factor. Any other questions? Thank you.
If you want, there's a, I don't know if this, I don't know, forward and backward. Oh, it does work. Yeah, you're in business. So forward, backward, and a laser pointer on top.
How does this work? Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Woodall. I'm not Kathy McGuire, but I am the Ecological Site Specialist for Regions 4 and 8. And Kathy McGuire, who's my Regional Director, has given me the opportunity to be able to give you a brief synopsis of our MLRA concepts and boundaries. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the journey we've been on in Region 8. The journey over the last couple of years to really refine and define our land resource area hierarchy. And like any journey, it starts with a vision. We sat down a couple of years ago. What's our vision? Well, our vision, of course, is to have really well-conceived soil survey products and ecological site descriptions with state and transition models that are helpful for land use management and planning and monitoring, and ultimately for the application of conservation on the ground. We know that's our end point. That's our vision. The question is, how do we get there from here? So we started to ask ourselves, what's an ecological site? Here's a definition, one definition of an ecological site. It's a conceptual division of the landscape out of the Soil Survey Manual, 2017. A conceptual division of the landscape. Therefore, it's part of the land resource area hierarchy. It's the lowest subdivision of the hierarchy, but yet it's part of it. Ecological sites and its correlated soil components. And like other subdivisions of the hierarchy, they can be differentiated across the landscape using the 7 elements folks have been talking about. That would be geology, physiography, soils, climate, plants, biology, water resources, land use and management. We also began to realize that, and we know that in the past, soil survey has done a lot of mapping to political boundaries, soil survey areas, county lines, state lines. But when you add ecological sites into that mix, it becomes more difficult, because to really put together a state and transition model, you have to look and understand and study that ecological site across its range. You still need a boundary, but you need an ecological conceptual boundary by which to put the concept and state and transition model of that ecological site together. So we still need boundaries. And so we realized that it was a critical precedent to creating ecological sites to develop these mid-level subdivisions, these MLRAs and LRUs. And we also began to realize that it really should be a top-down, bottom-up process. Top-down being figure out your MLRA and LRU concepts and boundaries, and then once we've done that, we can go into each LRU and do the bottom-up work. We can relook at our soils, look at our ecological sites, collect data, those sorts of things. Top-down, bottom-up. Now, and of course, an LRU makes a really good soil update project. So we started to ask ourselves, well, what is an MLRA? How do you define an MLRA? Here's a definition. An MLRA can be defined as a single physiographic province or a characteristic subset thereof, representing areas with similar potentials or limitations for use. Key here, a single physiographic province or a characteristic subset thereof. That's a great place to start thinking about what an MLRA is. Is it, and looking at Refinements' work, is an MLRA a whole physiographic province, or should it just be part of one? And if so, why? Also, we know that we're going to want to subdivide our MLRAs into LRUs. We needed a definition for an LRU. An LRU is characterized by ecologically distinctive properties that are interrelated. A key concept here is that your MLRAs, we would like them to fit within the range of characteristics of the MLRA. I mean, your LRUs to fit under the range of characteristics of your MLRA, that umbrella them. And also, we would like each LRU to have its own distinct suite of soil components and correlated ecological sites. And of course, again, each LRU would make a really great update project. One that you can build a local work group around and update the soils and the ecological sites. But to do that, again, we have to talk about boundaries. How do you know when you've moved from one MLRA to another or one LRU to another? How do you know on the ground? Of course, MLRA and LRU lines are drawn at regional scales. They're not meant to be used on the ground, right? We heard 1 to 5 million for an MLRA, 1 to 1 million for LRUs. But the question is, when you're out there mapping, when you're figuring out ecological site concepts, when you're gathering data, how do you know which one you're on? And that is through the development of boundary criteria. Boundary criteria is what truly defines the difference between two land resource areas. For instance, as an example, and what I mean here, here's a LRU map. We have 3 different LRUs. You have this Cretaceous plateau surrounding these canyons and breaks with some high plains Ogallala LRU to the east. Well, we know we have 3 distinct LRUs, 3 different central concepts, but on the ground, as you're moving toward the white line, how do you know when you've crossed from one to the other? And that is through the development of boundary criteria. The boundary criteria are composed of a set of rules. These rules describe specific element properties, some combination of those 7 elements, that differ between 2 MLRAs or LRUs. And those rules can be put in the format of a key to the MLRAs, a key to the LRUs, a key that's useful when you're on the ground figuring things out, as well as useful to our customers that are using the product. And of course, each LRU will have a key to the ecological sites. And this is the beginning of a key. This is a ecological site key tree, which will eventually create a dichotomous key for that High Plains LRU. So that was our vision. That's where we knew we wanted to go a couple of years ago. The next question was, how do we get there from here? And we knew it was going to be a mix of 3 different things. It was going to be a mix of science and art and collaboration. to come up with these MLRA and LRU concepts. So we started out the southern deserts of New Mexico, and we brought all of our offices out there, and we brought a lot of our state offices out there as well, and we started the dialogue going, asking ourselves, asking everyone, what is this MLRA? How is it different than those adjacent to it? How should it be subdivided into LRUs? What should those subdivisions be? Just getting the conversation rolling. And then we came out with some regional guidance on how, again, to define MLRAs and LRUs. And we rolled out this regional guidance through a workshop in Phoenix where we brought all the MSSLs in and ecological site specialists along with state office folks and we had a workshop. We went from table to table, neighboring office, visiting with neighboring office, talking about their MLRAs, their central concepts, their boundaries, how are they different. And we started the process because we realized that it was a combination of different things. First, you have to come up with a concept, an idea, and then you need to go out on the field and see if those make sense. So we had a number of field reconnaissance tours, neighboring offices getting together, looking at those ideas, seeing if it makes sense. How does it need to change? Refining and testing our ideas that we've had. This is from a field tour in eastern New Mexico. We had folks from New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas at this field reconnaissance. Now, the travel cap's been tough in the last year as far as reconnaissance tours. But we've done our best to keep the ball rolling. We've had, and the regional office has acted as an information hub. We've had a lot of conference calls going on between MLRA and MLRA and state office people talking about MLRA concepts and boundaries, and usually with a regional office person as part of that teleconference. And then once a month, we've been holding Region 8 teleconferences where the regional office would disseminate that information back out to everyone so folks from one side of the region to the other could hear the success stories and understand the issues that we're all dealing with and work on it together and hear the same story across our region on our MLRA and LRU concepts. And we've learned a few things along the way. One thing we've learned for these MLRA and LRU boundaries is to lean heavy on geology. This out of the Soil Survey Manual. Among the many perspectives that can be applied, geology provides the most reliable and robust context for understanding natural earth systems, including soils, across the widest range of environments. We've also learned to lean heavy on physiography. Experience has consistently demonstrated that physiographic information is the most robust, versatile, and least ephemeral basis for describing and partitioning the landscape mosaic, also out of the Soil Survey Manual. So, even though we have the 7 elements, one key concept we always tell ourselves, the more of those 7 elements you have stacked up at a boundary for your boundary concept, the stronger your boundary concept's going to be. But we also recommend, preferably, if we can have one of those elements be more of a static element, such as geology or physiography, it helps provide clarity at that boundary. So those are some things we learned along the way. Now, to give an example, I've got 3 examples here that of work we've been doing, and some of the bigger, I guess, changes that we're proposing. This one is MLRA 40. This is in southwest Arizona and Southern California, and traditionally there's been two MLRAs there. You have MLRA 31 in Southern California and 40 in southwest Arizona. We're giving it a name, the Sonoran Basin and Range. And it's Sonoran Desert. The main difference between the 2 MLRAs is that as you move west, it gets hotter and drier. And so that Southern California part, the Salton Trough and the lower Colorado River, as it flows into Mexico is extremely hot and dry, often given the name the Lower Colorado Desert, which has also been considered as a subgroup of the Sonoran Desert. But what the group decided is we have a very gradual climatic change as we move from east to west. And so the local groups and the folks from the state office are proposing to just move 40 all the way to the mountains of California, where you have a strong geologic physiographic break, as well as a physiographic break in the southern Mojave. So in some places in Region 8, we've merged MLRAs, other places we've split them apart, but always in the desire to create clarity of definition, clarity of boundary. That's always been our hope through the process. Secondly, this is what we call the Mogollon Transition Area. For those not familiar with Arizona and New Mexico, you essentially have two main physiographic provinces in Arizona. You have the Colorado Plateau to the north, you have the Basin and Range to the south, and in the middle you've got this wide band we call the Mogollon Transition, named after the Mogollon Rim. And it's a real interesting area. It's got a whole hodgepodge of geology and physiography and a whole lot of varied relief in it, a lot of volcanics, as it truly is been a turbulent area through geologic time. And we can easily put boundary criteria on the north part, as where the Colorado Plateau starts, and in the southern part where the Basin and Range is. And so we think that makes a good MLRA. What we've done here is merge 38 and 39 together. Basically, the historic definitions of those two was that 39 is cooler and wetter, 38 is warmer and drier. We do believe in capturing those differences and those aspects, but our work groups have felt that maybe that's better done at a lower subdivision of the hierarchy than the MLRA level. Thirdly, the Colorado Plateau has traditionally been MLRA 35, a really big one, and we're thinking about possibly separating or creating a new MLRA, splitting it in two, actually, have a western Colorado Plateau and an eastern Colorado Plateau. One of the definitions of the western part is that it's capped with Permian-age limestone, mostly of the Kaibab Formation. This includes the area north of the Mogollon Rim. You have a clear geologic break with that Kaibab Formation that is easily discernible on the ground, but also where you have that break, you have differences in soils, and you have differences in plant available water, as those limestone soils, Kaibab limestone-derived soils have been observed to be more productive than the sandstone-derived soils in the eastern part of the Colorado Plateau. So multiple elements, one being a geologic division and boundary. And that's what I've brought for today. We've put a lot of thought into all of our MLRAs. We've worked hard bringing in our state offices with us, our MLRA offices, and we're continuing the discussion. And we've probably done some tweaking in all of our MLRAs. So myself, I'll be available at the poster session if anyone wants to visit about what we've been doing. Myself and Kathy will be around for the meeting to visit with folks. And we're going to continue the dialogue and the discussion through the rest of this year. And also, in a lot of our reconnaissance trips and so forth, we've invited the partners in, and they've been a part of the process, Forest Service in particular, and we're going to continue to even do that stronger through this fall to keep working on that process. So with that, I am done. Thanks everyone for letting me speak.
Questions? Scott? you give your presentation?
It's up here, somewhere.
There's a third.
Is there an ag 296 Warren?
Yep, there it is.
That's right.
And then,
Is this guy working?
yeah, it is 4 backwards and laser point.
Oh, that's laser point.
It looks like it.
If there are questions, would you repeat the question? We're getting complaints, I can't hear what your question is.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Warner from Salina Regional Office, MO5, RO5. Chad Remley was supposed to be here, but his app went off on his phone. The red light at the Krispy Kreme went off, so he had to go. That kills in Kansas. All right, so we're going to talk about a little bit here the soil changes that we're doing in the Great Plains. A lot of our stuff actually came from field offices and the range cons as to why we should adjust the MLRA boundary lines. And actually, believe it or not, some engineers commented on some stuff. So if we look off here, the majority of our changes are going to be, there we go, somewhere. Okay. We're going to be working in this area. This is the tall grass prairie, blue stem, MLRA 76, Flint Hills. It's the last of the tall grass prairie in Kansas. And then we've got some changes up in here we'll focus on, and then MLRA 72 and 73. And the majority of these, like I said, came from the range cons and soil cons in the field offices. This first one, we're working with St. Paul office. We're finding some difference in plant vegetation here. So this is the Cedar River. This is the original boundary, basically on the county line, you can see. And so what we're doing is we're just going to move it to the Cedar River. And it actually fits better with the vegetation, and there are more dam sites, small watersheds on this side than there are on this side. We still haven't figured that one out yet. Okay. All right, MLRA 72, very large. This is all loess, deep loess in western Kansas, eastern Colorado, southern Nebraska. And what we're finding here is we have a more coarse loess, so the ecological sites and things have changed, a different set of soil series. And also, oddly enough, it fits better with the 1981 lines, actually. So we're kind of moving it to adjust. But this was all requests from the ecological site specialists and range cons. Kind of the same thing here. We've got the landforms are more similar to the east in MLRA 73, and also the vegetation in the eco sites. When you find some, most of it's corn, soybeans, wheat. But. All right, MLRA 75, we talked about that earlier today. It's rainwater basin, and MLRA 74 here, it's just kind of a mixture of where things went awry with all the rivers. So, but this does fit the landforms better here in 75, so we're moving the line up a little bit to fit with, again, the cropping. The land management's a lot different down here than it is in the north in 75. Okay. Kind of the same thing. Now this is MLRA 76. Again, this is the Flint Hills. It's about 95% rangeland. That is the main use. It's a finishing grass for cattle all around the country, or shipped there. So it's very important. It's burned every year. Major important agronomic use for Kansas. And sorry about that. We're finding that these lines in here, the soils, really, and the ecosites, again, fit better with the Flint Hills than previously in the MLRA 74. Mike was talking about a garbage pan MLRA, and that's kind of what 74 is. But, so we're changing the boundaries here to kind of fit. And then the engineers brought up that the soils are just odd in here. And so we're moving this line down. It'll kind of fit better. Bringing this MLRA down a little bit more, 73. So those are kind of the changes. Like I said, most of them have been brought forth by other disciplines. which is something I appreciate. I think that's great. It means they're looking at the maps and things and actually looking at the soil survey. So that's kind of what we have going on there. Not a whole lot. Any questions? Just remember, streaming adds 135 pounds for those of you watching. All right. Okay, next. Thanks.
You're on the hook. Are any of these your presentations up here? Do you? You want it? This is a poster?
Yeah.
There's a laser pointer at the top if you want it.
Okay.
And you can introduce yourself too, because I'm not.
That's it.
Not want to show up. Is this okay with you? Just leave it like this?
That's actually good right there.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Drew Kinney. I'm the regional director for Region 9 out of Temple, Texas, and I'm probably going to be one of the shortest presentations up here this afternoon because we're not proposing many changes, if at all, to our MLRA boundary lines. We are proposing a couple of LRUs, and the only major significant change that we would have would be, if I can get this, well, it'd be up the little island up in New Mexico, 77B. We're going to turn that over to MLRA 70, which would be out of Region 8. Those soils in that area are above 5,000 or 6,000 feet, which is not typical of anything in far eastern New Mexico on the Llano Estacado, or the area of the panhandle of Texas. So the soils, none of the soils that are mapped in that area are representative of the 77B area, which is in the panhandle of Texas and far eastern New Mexico. So we'll be turning that area over to Region 8. Other than that, we've had a couple of LRU suggestions, and that's to split some of the rolling red in MLRA 78C, to split it in half from north to south. It extends quite a ways north from central Texas all the way up into northern Oklahoma, and actually comes pretty close to the Kansas line. So we have a difference in productivity and ecological sites between the north half and the south half of that area, so we thought we'd just split that into possibly an LRU in the north and the south. And we also have a geological area that's kind of unique, and the soils are quite different in the eastern part of the Rolling Reds, or the western part of the Rolling Reds in 78B, and that area is in the southeastern or southwestern part of MLRA 78B. Other than that, those are really the only changes that we are suggesting. They're just some minor changes to the bumping the lines, and that's for the most part our state con and our state soil scientists in Texas and Oklahoma. They haven't had any significant problems with the MLRA boundaries. So if they're working and they ain't broke, don't fix them. So that's all we have. Any questions?
I like that philosophy. I was expecting more of it. Any further?
Dan Wing, you're on the hook. We are way ahead of schedule. We're shooting to be done by break. Everyone here, Region 10, right? 10. All right. You get to introduce yourself, all right? And
This isn't working?
it is working. No, that's not that one. It's this one, and back and forth, and a laser pointer at the top. You are. What's your name?
Good afternoon, Dan Wing, Region 10 Senior Regional Soil Scientist. We have about 5 major proposed adjustments to the MLRAs. I forgot my notes, 1 second. I forgot what we did. So we did, like everybody else, we combined the ELFIC subdivisions of the MLRAs into one MLRA. We redistributed some of the MLRAs. We had a few islands that are scattered. So we thought it'd be better to combine some of the MLRA or renumber some of the MLRAs. We are proposing to demote an MLRA down to an LRU, and we had some minor adjustments along some of the boundaries. And we do have one major adjustment to an MLRA that might cause some controversy, but we'll see. Here's an example of combining our subdivided MLRAs by A, B, C, and D. We got an example of 53 and 55. 94D is an example of one that we're going to redistribute. It's an island. It's an outwash plain in the middle of MLRA 90. Because it was a sandy outwash, it was separated out as drift, and it's not really a good example of sandy drift, but it's more of a developed during the MLRA 90. Historically, back in 1965, a lot of the changes after we started getting into that, we realized that 1965 first edition, they made some really good decisions, and we're trying to revert back to some of those original concepts. It wasn't even, 94 wasn't even recognized in the original concept. It was all part of MLRA 93, and then in 81, they identified these sandy components within 93. The other MLRA concept is demoting MLRA 92 into LRU of MLRA 93. It's the same material, but MLRA 92 is reworking of the Lake Superior Stony Loam, and it just has some lake influences. And it's been recognized as islands in the past in the first and second edition. And then in 2006, they got the idea to try to string them together to meet the acreage requirements and keep them and try not to have them as islands anymore. But these won't meet cartographic standards currently. So once we remove those corridors, we're going to reduce acres. I don't think it's going to meet the acreage requirement to continue as an MLRA. And here's kind of an example of once we make those two adjustments of eliminating the island of 94D and incorporating it into 90, and also eliminating the MLRA 92 as an LRU, and that'll combine up the two subdivisions of MLRA 93. We have some examples of some minor boundary adjustments. The Missouri Plateau has a really well-defined escarpment up in North Dakota. And once you get down to South Dakota, it becomes much more diffuse. We estimated the line based on elevation and drainage patterns. And it's a pretty diffuse boundary. So anybody can argue where that line should go exactly. But for management purposes, it's better than where it currently is. Here's an example of where a drumlin field was split right down the middle with an MLRA boundary. We made the decision to incorporate that entire drumlin field into one MLRA and the associated soils and give that all to MLRA 94 and Region 11. Here's another real minor adjustment. I hated to do this, but once we started looking at it, this is a sandy lake plain up against a sandy moraine to the east. And when we really looked at it, we didn't think it was much of a big deal, but if you look real close, it all has pivot irrigation associated with the sandy lake plain. So we thought, even though this is a really minor adjustment, it is noticeable at 1 to 5 million. And since we have an opportunity, now's the time to make the adjustment. Another minor change, MLRA 104 in the last edition in 2006 was brought up into Wisconsin. This is known as the driftless area, and the soils, the physiographic characteristics and everything really fit the driftless area 105, and nobody's arguing that this should really be brought back into 105. Historically, in the first and second editions, MLRA 104 never went up into the Wisconsin area. And now our major adjustment to MLRA 91. Historically, it was only recognized as outwash plains, 2 little outwash plains, one in Minnesota and one down in Wisconsin. In 2006, they decided to expand it. Well, actually, in 81, they did some adjustments too, expanded it out a little bit. But 2006, they made some really expanded it, and they combined all these really small outwash plains using river terraces and the Mississippi River. And we are proposing to eliminate all of the northern little outwash pockets that were combined by these small tributaries and incorporate those as LRUs into the surrounding MLRAs. Another adjustment they did is this tongue of MLRA 93 is actually an outwash corridor, and it was recognized as a subdivision of MLRA 91. This messy slide just kind of shows that we're incorporating all the little outwash pockets into the adjacent MLRAs. And when it's all said and done, this is our proposed change. Really eliminating the northern part of MLRA 91 within the northwest part of Minnesota, incorporating that mostly into the adjacent MLRAs, and leaving the majority of it as being this outwash corridor and a major original concept of the outwash plain in central Minnesota. So when we're all said and done, combine everything together, it's much more fluid and everything joins up a lot nicer than the original chaotic pile of MLRAs we had before. You got any questions? Thank you.
Presentation, you guys want to keep going? To keep time without a hot schedule.
left and right, and there's a pointer on there. It's
Okay, so if I want to post it, good. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. As you know, my name is Kevin Norwood. I'm the Regional Director in Region 11, Indianapolis. I don't have a map of the region, but our region pretty much covers 6 states. We cover Indiana, we cover Illinois, we cover Iowa, Wisconsin, Missouri, Ohio. Also, we cover parts of Kansas and Oklahoma and barely go a little bit into Nebraska. But before I get into my full talk, I want to give credit where credit is due. And I would like to thank Tony for putting together the presentation for me. And I would also like to thank my staff there in Region 11 for sending all of this information in. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of this, I like to be short and sweet. I am a son of a pastor. So as a little kid, when my dad used to have to go to speaking engagements, I would always go with him. When my dad would get up to the podium, sometimes he would say, "I'm going to be short and sweet." As a preacher's son, at the age of 7, I'm in the back of the pews just dancing down because Dad's going to be short and sweet. But a lot of times, 50 minutes later, my dad's still going, my hands on my face like this. I thought you were going to be done. But anyway, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, get to the point, and be out of your way. Okay, the first one is to establish 2 land resource units, and this is MLRA 113. This is part of the Missouri and Illinois. And what we're proposing is to have 2 113s, 113A for the part in Illinois and 113B for the part in Missouri. Also, this is here in Indiana and I think parts of Ohio too as well. But anyway, this is to correct the mislabeled land resource units labeled as 114B, and it should be 114A, so we're just going to change those around. Next, boundary refinements using parent materials in general soil association, especially in the 113 and also LRU in 114B. We're going to correct those. Boundary refinements, once again, using parent materials, that's the theme, and general soil associations in LRU 114, based on the evaluation of parent materials using Westboro and Schaefer soils tilled, and that is in Ohio. Also, we're going to do LRU 107B. It should encompass the Marshall Soil Association, and also LRU 108D should encompass the Sharpsburg Soil Association. So these are some of the changes that we're planning on proposing. Also, using parent materials and general soil associations to better reflect the mesothermic line based on geology, the Pennsylvanian versus the Mississippian. And this is to connect the island of MLRA 112. I think this is mostly in parts of Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma, right, Tony? Okay, thank you. All right, boundary refinements. Using parent materials and general soil associations, the soil data was collected on different landforms during the recent initial soil survey, and this is in Chicago, Cook County. The key soils and their associated landforms were used to adjust the boundaries in one team. All right. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This is also with MO10. The MLRA 104 and 105, the line moved in North Dakota County, Minnesota to include the outwash plains. Other changes were made to improve the delineation of the pre-Illinois till and the erosion surface. This is also with the LRUs in 108C and 115C. The existing boundaries inconsistently delineates the uplands above the Mississippi River Valley. This proposal moves the boundary to the foot slope at the base of the upland. MLRA 104 also stops at the confluence of the Iowa and Cedar Rivers. And other than that, that is it. Any questions for Region 11? We're good? All right, thank you.
gets removed. Second cousin of the,
Absolutely. Just run it right off of it if you want.
I'm gonna copy it over to that folder.
Oh, okay. That's fine. It's on the root of it. What happened there? LMAO, top one. Perfect.
You need to introduce yourself.
Yes, I do.
And his work, if you want to
Okay,
use it.
good.
And there's a pointer at the top.
Okay, the pointer at the top. That
Is this,
That's it. Go back. I want it blank.
there's one slide that's blank.
Yes.
Okay.
I want it. Go ahead and just put it up for now. Go back one.
Back one. All
Yeah,
right.
I got it.
You're here. All right.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Aaron Friend, and I'm filling in for the acting regional director. So with that, I'm conveying the information about our MLRA adjustments that we're looking to do. But before I get into some of that, there's a few things that I'd like to just briefly touch on, and if we have time at the end, we can ask some questions. So with that, Region 7 has had 2 or 3 meetings to kind of discuss and bring to light some of the issues that we have with our MLRA boundaries and LRU boundaries. So with that, we've got a few small changes that we would like to make down the road. A lot of those are just in the evaluation stage. We haven't made any final decisions and really evaluated it. So with that, we have, one of the questions that I would have that I propose to this group is, when we look at the criteria for what an MLRA is, I look at it and I see redundancy in the fact that we have water, physiography, climate, topology, and then we have soils. And with that, I don't hear anybody questioning. Either I have a misunderstanding of how the 5 soil forming factors or something, but that's just something maybe we can talk about here at the end if somebody has some suggestions on maybe clarifying in 296 how we define an MLRA. I realize that definition's been around for a very long time, but that's just something that maybe we can touch on. And so with that, the other thing that I hear from our users is those little pods that we filter out because they're too small to map. Our user oftentimes doesn't understand that there's those little inclusions within an MLRA, even at the scale. And so would there be harm in including a brief narrative about inclusions of other MLRAs within MLRAs, whether it's a percentage or just that they even occur, to help clarify the understanding of an MLRA and the MLRA concept. And so I hear all of these proposals about moving these lines and how are we going to do this or do that as an LRU, as an MLRA. After all of these adjustments have been made, we're going to be left with how are we going to take care of in NASIS the Legend Map Unit Area Overlap Table. That table, notoriously in the parts of the country that I've worked in, has been neglected. It often doesn't not have all of the proper overlap tables in it. So with that, I've been working with some people, Steve Peasley and Kevin Gotze and some others, on it's a model that runs GSurgo against a regional boundary, a soil survey office boundary, an MLRA boundary, and a county boundary, and a state. So this model works on a zonal area and then applies a max function to the results to categorize each map unit as assigning ownership of, say, MLRA based on the dominant condition. Where does the majority of the acres of that map unit occur for that soil survey area? So this model, after it does what it does, kicks out a spreadsheet that we have generated a form that uploads the results directly into NRCS without having to manually do it one by one. So the whole idea of taking an arduous process that could take weeks and months for a whole region can be consolidated down to less than a day. And with that, these results may not be perfect, but they're one heck of a good start to making the database complete, because we do not have that spatial aspect in NRCS, and that's the reason why the legend map unit, or legend area map unit overlap tables were created in the first place, is because we do not have a complete NRCS with spatial data tied to it. So with that, I'll move on just to touch on some of the, well, with that I'll show you the model. This is the output of the model, looking at MLRAs for Region 7, basically in Florida. And you'll see that because of the max function within a soil survey area, you have this feathering effect often, and not a clipped result. Some of these map units will bleed over into other regions, and that's the percent inclusion. And to take this model one step further, and with 296, we always talk about scale and inclusion, or excuse me, how scale impacts, you know, the line width and the line placement. By populating the legend area map unit overlap table, you are essentially assigning an MLRA to a map unit. And from a user's perspective, for ESDs or whatever, you can then start, if a map unit, if you do not like what is represented by that MLRA in that map unit, you can change the map unit. You could go through a recorrelation process or something to update the results. But the scale of these results is the scale of the published map. I've been working with Steve, and we are literally right there from completing this little project. So hopefully we can share it very soon for those who are interested. Moving on to the corrections that we would like to make. We have MLRA 133A, the southern coastal plain. There's been discussion about dividing that southern coastal plain because it goes from the Gulf of Mexico and the Mississippi River, basically all the way up to Washington, D.C. along the Atlantic coast. It's a huge MLRA, and we're looking at, from an ecological standpoint, you have precipitation differences. You go from 30-plus inches to 50-plus inches. Quite a diverse MLRA. So the question there is, it's all southern coastal plain, so what are we gaining by going through the effort of finding where we're going to break it? There's 3 proposed places that we're going to evaluate to see if it's worth pursuing. We have, moving on, MLRA 138. Let's see if I can get 138's right here. The question is whether that's an MLRA or an LRU. It's coastal plain capping over limestone. So the question there, we need to evaluate it to determine if it does really meet the requirements of an MLRA. Moving on to MLRA 154. 154 is this area in here, and as you can see, based on the results of the model, it's a broken, discontinuous MLRA, and it looks basically like the last time it was delineated. They put in some very general lines to capture the broken aspects of this MLRA. And MLRA 154 is the South Central Florida Ridge. So, excuse me. So, yeah, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with that. Moving on to backtrack just a little bit. This right here is MLRA 133A, and you can see 153A is the Flatwoods here. And based on the model and based on the mapping that's there, it looks like we need to refine this line just a little bit. But again, that's something we need to evaluate. Moving on to MLRA 155, Southern Florida Flatwoods. We have an issue with 155 and 156B. So this is 156B. And the question there is the chicken or the egg as far as the results of the model? There were unique map units created for that area, but it is at the same elevation and basically the same vegetation and land use as 155. So that's something that we need to evaluate. The other issue that we have with 155 is you have a Flatwoods coming down along the Gulf here, and then you lose any Flatwoods through here. So there's thought about bringing 155 up to meet 152A. And that would be kind of a narrow MLRA through there, but it's something that we're considering. And I think that pretty much covers what we're thinking about for Region 7. The one thing we have been doing is taking into consideration ESD work and how are we going to use the veg to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success down the road once PESs and ESDs are developed. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I think we have a little bit of time. So, all right.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Luis Hernandez. I am the regional director for Region 12, which is by popular vote the best region in the country. I just have a. Go ahead.
This works. Forward and backward, and then there's a pointer off top.
Okay. So what I have is just a brief summary of the assessment, the phase 1 for this project. So this is going to be, as Kevin said, short and sweet. We have plans to keep talking about the adjustment that we're going to make to some of the MRAs down the road. So let me keep going here. Before I go deep in my presentation, I think that I want to acknowledge and give credit to the army of folks that got this assessment, at least the phase 1 completed. And those are the MRA soil survey offices, the MRA technical teams, cooperators, MRA management teams. Those are the state soil scientists. And the soil survey regional office staff, mainly to Sean Fenn, who put together the PowerPoint presentation. He gave it to me and he went on leave. So just show you a map of the geographic area of Region 12, all the way from Maine to the Big Apple, and then move west and touch the state of Illinois. We have in the region 7 MRA soil survey offices, which means that we have 7 soil survey management areas. In the region, we have a total of 18 MRAs. We use the process that is in the handbook. You can go and check it out. It's part 649.6 is there. And what we decided to do was to engage, all the way from the soil survey offices and the technical team, engage them in the process. We decided to use the current structure that we have in the region just to get this project in the move. And then, again, we engage the technical teams. We engage the state soil scientists. We're going to engage some of the regional offices that are going to be impacted by some of the adjustments that we're going to make. And then from there, we're going to keep moving with the process, engage the state conservationists. This is just a brief summary of our findings. 5 soil survey offices came up with 17 proposals, okay? And to revise about 10 MRAs, 98, 99, 139, 140, and you can see the numbers there, to better reflect the resource characteristic and the MRA concepts. Again, some of the regions are going to be impacted, and we're going to be working with you. I just want to point out the proposal, the 17 proposals that we have, and I'm not going to go deep in the woods here, it's 17. I don't think that we have the time to go one by one. But those proposals are significant at field operations scale, but when we publish the handbook at the scale of 1 in 5 million, I mean, you are not going to see it, okay? I just want to share with you 2 examples so you get the idea. One MRA, MRA 140 or 144, we're going to shift the lines to better reflect the Wisconsin till in northern New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. So here is the area that we're talking about. This is how it is right now, and when we make the adjustment, it's going to look like this. Okay, and the second example I want to share with you guys is 144A, that we're going to adjust the line to include the Serpentine Ridge in Staten Island. So here is a Staten Island. This is part of one of the boroughs of New York City. This is how, again, it looks right now. It's in 149B. Again, we're going to shift the line from 144A to include the Serpentine Ridge. And then, the 149 is going to touch this area here of Staten Island. The next steps, again, we have a meeting already scheduled with the soil survey offices and the management team to revise all of these proposals. All of them already have information, the specific information. In July 11, we're going to have that meeting just to finalize the proposal. And then after that, we're going to submit that, I guess, to CHOC, to the center, in a geodatabase format so they can take it from there. And I think that that's it from Region 12. Any questions?
Mr. Huber, are you extending lines or including your subaqueous soils in new MLRA definitions or boundaries?
We are adjusting the lines so the areas within a specific MLRA, the concept are better fixed for those areas. That's what we're doing, just shifting lines. We are not changing lines. Major change, we are not doing that, Dave.
Have you considered adding MLRAs for coastal zone?
No, we talk about that land resource unit 2. We talk about that, but we don't have any major justification to do it. So we just decide not to do it. However, initially we talk about proposing a new MLRA for the urban cities in the East Coast, all the way from Boston to Washington, D.C. But we decided not to take that approach because you're moving from different climate regions, and things like that. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna propose some urban land resource units. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna be like islands, within the MLRAs that are in place right now. Yeah. Thank you.
You're next.
Yeah.
Beat it, dude.
I'm not
Kingsbury's
next.
up.
Oh, I thought that was next.
Scram.
You're not next.
Beat it. Do you have one on here?
Right there, this is 06, yeah.
If you need it, a pointer and an arrow back and forth.
Alrighty. I guess there's a few people out there left. Thanks, Chad, appreciate it. All right, well, Dave Kingsbury, Soil Survey Region 6 Director, Appalachians and Ozarks and Ouachitas primarily. I did learn yesterday that I was actually named after a soil, so that was an epiphany. Hey, I wanted to thank a couple of the staff members that helped out with this. Alan Moore has been riding herd on the MLRA proposals. Put him on that last year. Wendy Knoll put together the poster that's in the other room, and the MSSO staffs for organizing and interfacing with the management teams and tech teams. So at any rate, Soil Survey Region 6, we've got about 167 million acres. We've got 23 MLRAs and/or subdivisions thereof. Diverse landscapes and land use throughout the region. It's mostly bedrock controlled and primarily sedimentary geology and significant amount of federal lands. And we tasked the MSSOs with contacting their management and tech teams to solicit proposals and comments on the MLRA the existing MLRAs and LRUs. And we got 3 significant proposals back. But before I get into those, basically those are line changes. Addressing the alphanumeric MLRAs, we've got a number of alphanumerics out there, starting with like 116 A, B, and C. When you read the Ag Handbook 296, they actually are defined more as MLRAs. So further work is going to be required working with the states of Missouri and Arkansas. And then MLRA 118A and B, it's assumed that those will probably be combined into one MLRA and then broken into LRUs. 120A, B, and C, the way those are worded in the handbook, those also will probably likely be LRUs. And then 130A and B, basically the Blue Ridge, that'll also probably be broken into LRUs. 135B, we've got to work with Drew Kinney on that one, probably be LRUs, but I'm not entirely sure. Those are mostly Cretaceous materials, from what I understand. And then we will be following up with states and management teams through that process. But the individual line change proposals, we've got, like I said, 3. They impact MLRAs 126, 127, and 130A. And those, the MLRAs that are impacted around them, for 127, we've got 124, 125, 126, 128, 139, 140, and 147, so it's a few. That's the most extensive. 126 only has one bump out into MLRA 124. And then 130A, the Northern Blue Ridge, the affected MLRAs there are 136, 147, and 148. Getting into, sorry about that. The first proposal, 126. This was kind of a no-brainer. The southwestern tip of 126, 126 generally consists of similar geology. In that portion, Monongahela and Conemaugh formations, mostly red shale parent materials that produce clayey alpha soils, and versus the more loamy brown soils that typically ultisols and inceptisols. And in that area, it is mostly the red beds and red soils that are formed. And slope stability issues in those red parent materials, so there are significant land use issues. And it's consistent with similar areas in Ohio and West Virginia. And that was the management team was contacted via email on that one, because that was, like I said, that was a fairly easy one. Moving on to 127, this is the most extensive, and 127 is the eastern Allegheny Plateau and Mountains, and it's primarily forested, steeper, high elevation areas than surrounding areas, and mixed sedimentary geology dominated by sandstone. It's cooler, higher precipitation areas. We've got a lot of frigid soils that run through there. And these adjustments align similar soils, topography, and land use. And it does include all frigid and perutic areas, so the line changes do keep them within 127. And like I said, there are quite a few modifications to it. Principally, let's see. I can't probably see that too well. Greenbrier Valley, this was probably the most significant change. There's a fairly large valley that was always included in the Region Valley to the east. But that was basically similar folding and similar soils and geology. It was decided to push that back into the 127 MLRA, and just basically tweaking all along the boundary. You can see cut off a couple of these little peninsulas that extended into New York State. So it is just a smoothing of the lines in some cases. And it's many people have reviewed it, and it got it discussed at a management team meeting, and there was concurrence on that. And then 130A, we actually had a tech team, or I'm sorry, so I'm trying to think. We had a webinar on this where we had several, many maps that were shown to the groups. We had staff from Region 3 as well as Region 6 and state soil scientists in various states, primarily Virginia, but also Maryland. And the big changes, the big changes there were, all right, well, you can see these two fangs coming down. They basically delineate a mountain feature. However, at 1 to 5 million, it is unlikely if those will actually be wide enough to show. So in all likelihood, it'll be cut off at the base of the fang, so to speak. And then in this southern area in here, there was a landform that was distinctly Blue Ridge. And those areas are, the Blue Ridge basically are primarily forested. They're steeper than the surrounding areas, generally not agricultural. Igneous high-grade metamorphic geology dominates. And the proposals align similar soils, topography, and land use. So the western blip, or the line change up here and down here, the Ridge and Valley section, or MLRA to the west, it's mostly sedimentary. Well, it's all sedimentary, agricultural and dissimilar soils. To the east, the Piedmont, many are similar soils, but it's agricultural in nature. The topography is a lot more level, and cultivated crops are very common in that area. And then again, the two fangs are cartographically probably not feasible. So they'll be defanged, basically, in the final analysis. I think that's about it, if there are any questions. Although, I think we've decided not to extend our lines to include subaqueous soils in our region, since we ain't got them. So, any questions? Thank you.
It is time for break. We have one presentation left, and I'm actually going to put that on hold as a means to try to get you back after the break, because at no extra cost to you, the Forest Service would like to make a presentation about their eco-site. So I'm going to use that as a draw to get you guys back here after the break, as well as tell any of the defectors to come back and join us as well. So we got a half an hour, and we will see you guys at, was it 3:30? Put it in here with the rest of our stuff.
Sure.
So that if it gets distributed.
Yeah.
Reminder, in addition to Region 3, we are getting a bonus presentation from the Forest Service, so stick around for that. And we'd also maybe like to open it up for discussion, a general discussion, if anyone has any general comments about what they'd like to see out of the MLRA update process, or anything specific out of me, what they would like me to do to help you. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Greg Taylor of Region 3. Greg Taylor of Region 3. Those words for forward and back, and then there's the laser on.
Okay. All right. Well, ours is real simple. In case you saw our poster, this presentation will be a little bit longer than the poster was because we don't have a poster. The reason we didn't have a poster is we really don't have anything to change. At a 1 to 5 million scale, we just really couldn't come up with anything. Our offices, we didn't have a whole lot of arguments. Our arguments have all been internal. In other words, within our existing boundaries as they are. And they're small things. Like where the 136 runs up to a certain point, it looks like it's going up to capture something for a specific reason. And that's just really not the case. And so you look at what the guys that were out there mapping, what they found, and you can see off top left up here, this is Surgo, and I know we're not mapping Surgo in an MLRA scale, but it's clues to an issue. All the blue up there that you see is right in here, this shaded blue, is predominantly northern Piedmont soils in the southern Piedmont, or the current boundary. So it just begs to say that, look, somewhere right around this river, instead of having it come up here to a point, we just need to round this off. And that's really all we're proposing right here. Same thing over here. You've got the 149A, the northern coastal plain. And you can see here, it's sort of, this is the existing line, and we're sort of proposing to bump it up. I didn't have the rest of the Surgo on here, but just put a little line here and just clean these edges up within our boundary. Not a big controversial thing, and not really knocking on anyone else's door with this. So, again, at a 1 to 5 million scale, we couldn't come up with anything that we felt like was really worth changing. So, with that being said, this will be the world's fastest presentation. So, you know, we did get into, this is up in Virginia, so it's part of our planning, part of our discussions with our tech teams up there. And so we just kept it pretty simple. Any questions? Do I get a prize for being the fastest? Yes.
So you talked about the lines on a 5 million scale. When you're on the ground mapping, how do you know when you cross, or how do you know the difference between that MLRA and the adjacent MLRA?
How do you know the difference?
Yeah, concepts on the ground.
Okay, like let's keep the northern Piedmont, for example, because that was my line, right?
So repeat the question. Did everybody get a question?
Yeah.
How do you know if you were in one MLRA or the other when you're mapping?
Yeah, you see, that line is actually blue on the ground. And when you cross that line, you know you're in it. No, I'm kidding. So, the landforms start changing, but your plants start changing. And when, like Fairfax County is one of the newer counties to be mapped in Virginia, for example, and there's sort of 149 soils. I mean, I get all my numbers mixed up standing up here in front of all you. But the northern Piedmont soils, and then we had the southern Piedmont soils. And for years, we took like southern Piedmont soils and just converted them mesic to thermic. And then over time, we've updated these mapping concepts. Therefore, we've established new series as well. Those newer series, because this is more recent mapping, is how that county was mapped. And so it just, again, leads us to believe that it fits the rest of it. Now, if I turned on hillshade and you looked at this, you wouldn't be impressed, because there's not a whole lot of difference anywhere in this area based off. There's no scarp. There's no, as we get a little bit further north, these mountains or the part of the Piedmont, the foothills, they become more dissected. Instead of more rolling like you'll see in 136, they get a little steeper edged and everything. Does that make any sense? Am I explaining it anyway?
So one of your main concepts is your soil temperature.
One of them, yes, one of them. But then again, this is not the mesothermic line. It's further south. We do have thermic southern Piedmont, we have mesic southern Piedmont soils as well. So there's, again, the topography starts to change. And so there's, again, we're talking about a 1 to 5 million scale. This line isn't exact. Somewhere in here we've picked up a change, and so the line was put on there.
Thank you.
If you want more confusion, just catch me later. Anything else? Yes, sir.
How wide is a line? My math is a little rusty.
Well,
if your math at 1 to 5 million, if that line is on the ground, how wide is it? It's like a mile wide, isn't it? Or more?
It is, and some people call it I-85 too, I think. But no, I don't know. Yeah, it's a mile wide. You're right. Anything else? All right.
All right, next up, we are inviting our guest speaker again. Excuse me, yes. They're coughing mostly for the duration of your, not the content. Next up, we are pleased to have Wayne Robbie with the Forest Service, Region 2, I believe, and I know 3, but certainly in Albuquerque, because in jobs past, I've worked with him. So that part I am certain of. And he will be speaking, well, I'm going to let him introduce what he'll be speaking.
Hello, my name is Wayne Robbie. I'm a supervisory soil scientist with the USDA Forest Service Southwestern Region in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The topic I'm
Is there what if I mute it? Is it gonna go on its own?
Yeah, no, I'll advance it, so.
Just mute it?
Yeah, just mute it, there we go. How about that, huh? I had to have some entertainment this afternoon. Well, and good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to address you folks today. I just got hijacked into this presentation just about half an hour ago, but I believe it's very appropriate, especially from a cooperator, and that's how I'm going to approach this. So thanks, Chad. And I'll push the buttons and so.
Forward and back, and then there, if you need a laser pointer.
Oh, that laser. Okay, got it. All right. But first I want to just say I was very impressed with the previous presentations on people's knowledge about the MLRAs that they work within. Seriously, I'm from the Southwest. I'm the regional soil scientist, and I know New Mexico and Arizona pretty well, but I haven't been around the U.S. too much. But just listening to all of you give updates on the MLRAs that are very specific to your geographic areas just educated me quite a bit. So thank you for that opportunity. So looks like this thing's gonna roll on its own, and so let me see if I can go back here at this. Okay, so what this part of this presentation, we're going to do this in a couple of format. I'm going to do a little bit of talking here. Going to have Jeff Bruggen come up and talk, maybe Larry too, and then we would like a discussion because as a cooperator, you know, the MLRA topic is very deep and near to us, as much as the National Hierarchy of Ecological Units, or EcoMap, as many people know that. So in 2014, Joe Brown asked me to give a presentation at an ESD meeting. It was at the SRM meeting, Society Range Management meeting, and it was an ESD forum. So Curtis, you may have seen this before, okay? And so I I took on the challenge, and I wasn't able to attend the meeting, so that's why you heard the voiceover. So quickly, I'll run through this presentation and get the gist of what we're trying to do here. So he said, Wayne, I want you to talk about characterizing MLRAs. And from the Forest Service, I thought that was a real important challenge. So what I did is I actually retitled that talk into something that looks like this, using ecological frameworks for wide-scale analysis for sub-regional conservation planning, because that's what it's all about, the conservation planning. Regardless of where we are, that's what it's about. So I went back to the handbook and pulled out a couple of statements why MLRAs are so important. And you know this. You're more of an expert in this business area than I am. But fundamentally, whether you're looking at land units and the purpose behind stratifying the landscape and land units and whatever kind of context you want to approach, it's very important for planning, as we talked about. And then furthermore, go back, each MLRA represents certain biophysical features out on the landscape. And I would submit that biophysical part, those features are really, in our business area, the Forest Service, really has to be described in the context of ecosystems and ecological units. So, and one of the most important parts for this is informing policy for all these reasons: agriculture, natural research, and resource inventory. So, this is a table that came out of Caudell. This should look fairly familiar to some people. Came out of the Interagency Ecological Site Handbook for Rangelands. Okay, so but here you have your this hierarchical system, the classifications. You have mapping systems, both the hierarchical ecological units that the Forest Service uses, the NRCS. Here's MLRAs right here, kind of at the sub-regional level, and LRUs. I actually think LRUs do come down into the landscape level right here. And then NatureServe has their own system, so there are a number of different ecological classification systems, and mapping systems. But I picked this so it worked better. So for us, but it's one thing to line things up in a matrix like this. It's another thing to actually see how they work. Okay, especially when you start dialing in on scale and certain properties. So what I did is I selected an MLRA, Kathy, 38, and because if you know anything about the Southwest, specifically Arizona, the Tonto transition, as it's called, is geomorphically and physiographically undeniably delineable. Okay, you can find that on the landscape because the line is not that wide. You know, it's the edge of a cliff, the Mogollon Rim. Okay, as it meets the desert. Okay, very. So what I did there, I took MLRA 38, Mogollon transition, overlaid that with the Forest Service EcoMap, and then Omernix level 3 from EPA. You know, and he's made some really decent attempts at mapping ecoregions. So with that, what I looked at was the principal mapping and design criteria, and this is basically what you're seeing right here. You know this. You see this. This is the fundamental to MLRAs. And then what I did is, here's MLRA 38. That's the way it looks like on the landscape right there. Okay. You haven't changed it yet, have you, Kathy? Or oh, geez, here we go. Okay, that's all right.
It'll still be there. It'll just be 30 and 39.
Yeah, and obviously need some smoothing on that line work there, but. Physiographically, again, very identified feature. So we looked at, took the EcoMap section, what we use sections and subsections for, which is equivalent roughly in a scale-wise to MLRA 38. And this is kind of the basis for that, why we use that thing. So we looked at the criteria, again, that we use for ecological units, okay, very similar right there, if you will. And then overlaid ecological subsections on MLRA 38. Okay, so this is the dilemma we're dealing with presently still. Okay, and this is what we'd like to resolve to some degree. So if you look at the number of intersections of one MLRA to an ecological, basically subsection, you can see that there's different proportions of those subsections and sections that are in MLRA 38. So, but there is a high degree of coincidence in parts of that, okay? That's the message right there. So then we took Armonix level 3. Again, that's kind of basically the background of why level 3. And then we intersected, looked at the criteria that he had used for his map unit design. Very similar, okay? Although, take one more look at that, okay? So there's, and again, they different purposes, different criteria, but some similarity there too, commonality, if you will. So this is what the intersection of ecoregion, Armonix ecoregion level 3 and MLRA 38 looks like, okay? Again, to some degree, high degree of coincidence. So what does that leave us? And this is the take-home slide right here, people. Is when you look at the summary of map unit design criteria for the major ecological frameworks, you see that there is a lot of commonality there. Geomorphology, obviously soils, vegetation, but climate plays a different role, plays a big role in MLRAs and EcoMap sections. It also soils play a big part. Hydrology was a little bit more of a factor in MLRA design versus EcoMap section, although that's Armonix's whole thing. And then there's some commonality in disturbance, because disturbance is really a process. So where am I going with this? It's this slide right here. Okay, this is, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff here to explain this slide here. So we think there's a lot of coincidence out there, coincident lines, but the message was that even though we're using common data elements, how we structure those data elements and how much weight we put into those data elements that are common to MLRAs and the ecological hierarchy, that's what makes the difference, and that's what drives the mapping process. And I think that's where we need to come together. Sitting around the map, we're always going to draw different lines because it's an art form, but sitting around and actually diving into the criteria of soils, what kind of soils information, what kind of geology information, what kind of vegetation, and how much weight we put on those data elements to drive the mapping process. That's where I think we need to come together on. So I'll leave it at that. Kathy?
You're exactly right, Wayne, and that's what we've been trying to do is what is the concept of that MLRA? What makes it different from its neighbor? Right. And all those things you said, and that's where we have common ground, is that we both know the soil properties and the geology and the climate, but why is that different than the neighboring?
Mm-hmm. And how much weight are you going to put on that?
Yeah.
As far as the driving.
Exactly. So I think you're right on. So that's what we're trying so hard to get our concepts cleaner.
All right, I just wanted to say a couple things about what we're trying to do with the Forest Service EcoMap and subsections right now. We're going through a process of doing some updates. Sound familiar? So we're taking some of our published section, subsection data that we had from 2007, and we're going through 3 phases. The first phase being making corrections to known errors, name changes where we know they're wrong, symbols, and some minor line changes. The second phase we're going to do is recharacterize our existing section and subsection with new national data sets, our P&V data sets, our climate data sets. Since we went through our initial publication, we have a lot of new information. We think we can better characterize that EcoMap information. And lastly, which is more of a long term, which is kind of why we're wanting to stand up here and talk to you, is that we're looking at possibility of remapping our section and subsection across the whole U.S. Because we did it similar to what you're doing on a region by regional basis with the Forest Service. And when you look at from region to region, there are some differences. So what this map is up here, we just took a snapshot of a plot that I made just before I started driving up here. The black lines are the MLRA lines, and the red lines are our subsection lines. A little different scale, but our subsections are also very coincident with our section lines, which are probably more closely in scale to your MLRAs. But I wanted to show you with this map, you can begin to look at some of these areas. These lines are so close already. I mean, they're just about there. I think there's an opportunity here that we have to help our users make these lines similar. If our objectives, as Kathy just mentioned, are very similar, and we have very similar delineators of these ecological units, why not take that little bit of extra effort to make these things the same? Doesn't say you have to do it everywhere. I forgot the speaker of the state range con yesterday, Curtis. One of the first things he said is that we need to make the agency, or need to make the agencies in the department more efficient. I can't think of a better way to make something more efficient in the department than trying to bring some ecological hierarchies together to show that cooperation in what we're doing. So with this map, I've got the map here if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's plotted out in 4 feet. I mean, you can put your glasses on or your magnifying glasses. You can take a look at it. Our sections and subsections are pretty good. What you'll see on that map is a lot of our subsections are probably very close to your LRUs. So here's another opportunity to maybe help make some coincidence with your delineation of your LRUs. And I want you really to take a look at that map if you have a chance to see where some of your MLRA lines are currently very close to our subsection lines. So I don't think it's going to take much effort to try and make those things coincident in certain areas. Did you have any more slides on here, Wayne?
Oh, it's a couple hundred left, but I think we might want to pass on those.
So we appreciate you allowing us to come up here and share a little bit of information. I'll put that map on the back table here or something, if you want to take a look at it on the individual regions and see what lines you might be able to work with on the Forest Service. And from there, I don't know what the process is for us to be engaged, your partners to be engaged in your three-phase process, but we'd really like to work with you and try to make everything come out as efficiently as we can.
Actually, I only have a couple more slides, and this was essentially the conclusion that was from the original presentation. So, but I think the second bullet is really what Jeff is advocating, is that integration, and because and you know that, and but we're just here trying to pitch it even to a greater degree, and a lot of it has to do with some efficiencies, especially. You know, in the whether we're looking at assessments or even monitoring of the inventory processes, especially soil surveys. So, and so anyhow, those were some of the most important conclusions we had at this particular talk here. So, thanks. Hey, I really appreciate giving the opportunity. Appreciate it. Bye now.
That's what the whole MLRA update process, the Allegheny update process is a collaborative effort, and not only do we have to play nice with ourselves, but we have to play nice with the states as well as our cooperators. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity to include our cooperators. Matt, you got to.
I really appreciate that presentation. I think it was spot on. And in the committee meeting that I was in yesterday with Curtis, one of the points that folks raised in that particular committee meeting was exactly the same point. Without even having seen how many of the lines are coincident, was that it's a source of confusion and inefficiency that we've got so many different ecological hierarchical frameworks at play in North America, particularly having multiple within the department, seems especially inefficient. And yet, the solutions that I'm hearing thrown out today are the notion that region by region we ought to address that. And I'm wondering if there isn't a more efficient way to enter into the update rather than region by region, a national effort to develop one ecological hierarchical framework, and whether or not we sort of have the whole idea turned on its head in how we're going about it within NRCS right now.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I would not so much counter as just food for thought. So the reason that we are doing it region by region is because the regions are the people that have the expertise in order to decide where that line should go. But I think you're right. I mean, I think it needs to be a national effort. In just the same way that, you know, we have our regions, I suspect and I guess know to some degree that the Forest Service, they have their their regions that would have their opinions on the lines in their respective areas.
I didn't mean to imply that local expertise would not be critical in the success of the effort, but and I hope this is not a misguided comment, but when I looked at the posters for the NRCS region boundary changes last night, other than Region 10, every region was proposing changes at a scale much closer than 1 to 5 million. So we're not even true to our own data structure because maybe at 1 to 5 million we're kind of okay. And it almost seems like we're trying to make MLRA boundaries coincident with CIRGO boundaries, and I'm not entirely sure that they're supposed to be. Just some food for thought. And I appreciate what you said about the need for the local expertise to be involved, because I didn't mean to imply that that the regions wouldn't be absolutely critical in the process. But what I'm not hearing is a mechanism to take that local expertise and bring it all together into one coherent effort that would really actually provide us the efficiencies that I think we really ought to be pursuing.
Noted. I think we need to move forward in a more cooperative manner, and I will do what I can to see that happens.
I'll just jump on that back too. I think you're absolutely right, but I think the local guys need to do what they do, but they have to have the support and the cooperation of the guys above them. So those leaders at the national level all have to come together and say, yes, I want my guys doing this, and I want them to have the ability to work with each other. If we don't get that from the top, no matter how good we are here on the ground, we're going to be pulled apart because we'll have different priorities. If all the agencies that are involved in this have that strong, yes, we want to come together and do this, that'll give us more power to be able to do the local stuff with the support from the top. And that's hit or miss sometimes. It's not quite there.
I guess I would like to continue on with these thoughts and open the floor up for any sort of general discussions that anybody might have about this process, both internally within the NRCS and with cooperators. Yes, Tony.
You know exactly what kind of changes you're looking to make. Is it just the changing of the MLRA triple letter to an LRU, or are you finding boundaries? It's never been clear exactly what kind of changes you're looking for in this particular proposal.
Some of the things that I will say, I mentioned this earlier when I spoke. I'm new to this, but it's not just dropping the letters off. It's the handbook has been refined. This will be the third edition, third update, and soil science in general. I think we'd all agree that our knowledge evolves over time with experience, and that this opportunity to update should reflect any additional knowledge that we've gained, as well as taking into consideration things like the new PRISM climate data sets. If not updating any sort of line work, you might have more information that you would just want to put into the description of an MLRA. So it's kind of wide open, but I hear you, and I will try to get a more defined focus of what exactly is wanted by leadership.
So the way we've kind of always looked at it is that we're not so much worried about the lines, but we want to have concepts. We want those concepts of that MLRA to be clear enough so like GS7 can go out and say, okay, I have this, 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 I must be in this MLRA, which means I'll be in this LRU, and then the same thing, that they have enough information to go through a key. and those keys are gonna be. So it's not, so you might not wanna change one single line, but you might wanna beef up why those MLRAs are MLRAs. You know, what makes them unique from the neighbors. So that's where we've kind of approached it from is that we're not necessarily gonna change a whole bunch of lines, but what we wanna do is make sure that the concept of that MLRA, LRU, ecological site is well defined, and you can run it through a key and you'll know what you got.
To go along with what Kathy said, I think we have the opportunity now to work with our partners. As we're working on these mid-level subdivisions of the hierarchy, defining these concepts, defining the boundary criteria between them, doing this top-down, bottom-up approach. And I think the opportunity is there to come together, the different elements to do that. I think we can pursue that direction.
I agree.
Jeff, can you tell us a little bit more? You said you guys are working on an update. Can you describe that a little bit more?
We've got our representative from our geospatial technical center here, who's doing most of that work for us. So I'll let him explain a little bit more. Do you want a little bit more of the technical aspect of what we're doing?
Overview, whatever.
Whatever you want to do. Now, here's your
put it in any thoughts in a while,
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if we're both updating, we should probably do it together, you know. And you have been. You've been involved with a lot of our stuff too. So.
I think from our perspective, from at least my perspective, it is a matter of trying to update it to be more consistent with what our concept is around modeling. I'm not sure we're building a key, for instance. I mean, your concept of having a key is really interesting.
That's our goal, is that we'll have an MLRA key, an LRU key, and then an actual ecological site key. And that'll run those keys will run whatever database that we have.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see what that means for a 5,000 scale.
Yeah.
Or 1 million scale. So the line work that we're trying to do is just make sure that we capture what is consistent within each of the regions right now, rolling that up to a national level. So we're reviewing information, creating, making available geospatial data to help define where the line segments go, and doing that region by region. Once that's accomplished, we'll roll that up into layers and the regions to get that finalized. Our goal is to have it done by fall, late fall, early winter this year. So we're pushing ourselves really hard to do that. I'm not sure how that fits with the timeline you guys are on.
So that will be initial, I'll just call it an update, but corrections to known errors.
Okay.
And if you do take a look at closely our subsection maps, there are differences between Forest Service region and Forest Service region, because when that was originally published, we did it region by region.
Exactly. It's
Sounds
like our
familiar,
county.
right? And it's not, I don't consider it quite a national data set. It's a regional data set. We'd like to bring it up to national data set in a similar definitions, similar scales of mapping, be able to use a hierarchy.
So you're getting rid of your Forest Service boundaries?
We like, well, yes, yeah. I mean, they're all joined, obviously.
Yeah, okay.
But the original mapping was done by individual regions. But down the road, longer term, we'd like to bring these into more consistent and from that top-down approach and still allow from that bottom up. Some places are going to meet, you're not going to match. You're just not going to be able to nest one with another. But I think if there was ever a time we were going to try and do this together, now's the time.
And I think Matt made a really good point. I don't think the layers will ever nest, but the concepts will nest. So they're separate products. The 1 to 5 million is a product, the LRU layer is a product, and then the servo is a product. Those concepts will come through all the way, and those will be consistent, but you're never going to stack those 3 layers together because they're at different, they're drawn at different scales.
For different interpretations.
Exactly.
although CERGO is not, it doesn't seem to me to be part of an ecological hierarchical framework to the same extent that MLRA, LRU are, very similar to the EPA ecological hierarchical framework, as well as this section subsection concept. Because
the tie-in is that every component will be tied to an ecological site. So it's at that very fine scale.
Yeah, I think where the CERGO and the component
yeah,
and the ecological sites fit in, I'm talking about the ecological hierarchical frameworks that are used. And if you look at the Forest Service and the EPA's ecological hierarchical framework, they do stack from one scale to another.
Oh, okay.
Ours is the only one that doesn't. And when we're talking about soils mapping, ideally StatsCo should stack on top of CERGO. And it doesn't. And there was, my understanding at least, is the division talked a long time when we went to CERGO about a continuous update process with StatsCo, so that StatsCo would be coincident with CERGO as we refined our understanding about soils. And we just haven't ever undertaken that. But to me, the soils mapping is different from the ecological hierarchical framework. And we do see the EPAs and the Forest Service stacking on top of each other. But the big issue with regards to MLRA and CRA, LRU not stacking is that when you get to the MLRA level, for example, we're not mapping those lines at a 1 to 5 million scale. We're zooming in on CERGO and we're trying to copy what's shown in CERGO as a driver there, rather than recognizing that these ecological boundaries are transitory. You can't see them on the ground when you're standing there. But we could conceptually develop maps of ecoregions that do stack. The other agencies, I think, have shown that.
Anybody else?
In the Washington office and kind of new to this, I just wanted to know what mechanism do you use to disseminate your modifications to your MLRAs? Because from what I'm hearing, every region is different, and so some are receiving information, it's just kind of done on an ad hoc basis. And also, have you all thought about maybe a steering committee from the level to help prioritize projects and also just kind of collaborate on some of the business aspects of it? I've seen it done in water and air, but I don't see such a thing in soils. Just a comment.
I don't know where this particular update kind of request is coming from. My short answer is someone just thought it was Tom. I don't know who that person was. And in terms of kind of coordinating it and everyone kind of doing the same thing, they do have the same mandate, mandate. They do have the same, I guess, instructions for what they need to do in order to bring their regions, up to date. I mean, they don't have any specific set of instructions. They have guidelines, and that was one of Eva's questions. One of the other regional directors was, I guess, she kind of felt like she didn't have like specific instructions for which she needed to follow in order to have a common template that everybody else is following. It does, I guess, feel a little bit ad hoc. I mean, every region does have a sense of flexibility to update their region the way that they want to, but they do have some common guidelines. So, both cartographically and conceptually about what these different land resource areas represent. So, I think that they do need probably a little more guidance, and I'm going to see what I can do to get that to them, and hopefully it clarifies things for them.
Just to add on to that a little bit, I think one of the reasons why this update has occurred at this particular point in time is due to the Provisional Ecological Site Initiative. To be able to clearly create ecological site concepts, you need to set up that mid-level subdivision by which you can define a boundary for ecological sites. And I think that initiative has driven the need to go back and define and refine our MLRA and LRU concepts and boundaries. So it's my impression on the sequence of events that have happened.
Makes sense. Curtis, do you have anything to add to that? You know, from a leadership perspective, is that why the 296 update is at hand?
No, I mean, it was, I think, unfortunately, more coincidence than by design. There were driving issues, but the issues that were driving needed updates in 296 were not the same ones that were driving the need to create the provisional initiative as opposed to the traditional way of working up individual ecological sites. So it's just, I think it's more fortuitous than.
So in the Forest Service, there's a couple of reasons, but a few that I can think of is, you know, we're going through a number of forest plan revision. We're reevaluating the data sets that we're using. We're reevaluating the way that we kind of look at the landscape. And as we do that, we can refine it based on newer and improved geospatial data sets, such as geology or soils. And we look to those to help refine our line work. And it really improves the way that we can monitor and manage the landscape for forests and water quality and the issues that we're responsible for. So it's maybe more fortuitous, but we'll take it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the stars are lining up, let's
Go
move
for
with
it. Yeah.
Take the ball and run.
Any other comments? All right, well, I guess that wraps it up. We got done quite a bit early, so enjoy your free time, and thanks for attending.
I was having
I'm beginning to get that feeling.
We welcome that, actually, so.
Yeah, this literally, anything that has me involved with this meeting, people called and told me, oh, I see you're on the agenda. And I didn't know until very recently, so it's kind of ended up on me, and that's fine. I'm happy to work with it.
We're happy to have you.
Hopefully I can live up to any expectations.
It'll be